Thank you for making time for us today and for making it through any technical hurdles you may have faced. Today's topic is cooling costs. 4 by the 4th, smart moves to cool off your cooling costs. We are going to make this a practical session. And let me lay out the game plan for today. We'll do some quick introductions of the panelists. We'll dig into our core material, and we'll definitely have some time at the end for questions. Look forward to fielding your questions. And actually, to that end, we're going to gather the questions using the GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar chat feature, or it may actually say questions. Feel free to type those in throughout the course of the webinar. We will see those, we'll take those down, and we'll address those either through the talking points or at the end of Q&A. So I just wanted to let you know about that. Great. Let's keep going here. There we go. So let me briefly introduce our panelists. I'm very excited to have them here today. Tim Reichert is CEO of Energy Sherlock. Energy Sherlock is a full-service energy management provider for commercial facilities. Tim and his group has over 20 years of experience creating operational efficiencies for business, and energy is foremost amongst those. We're also joined today by Ralph Vidiello, who's a general manager and head trainer for the Not Your Average Joe's concept, one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing fast casual concept in the eastern U.S. Ralph has a very deep background in restaurant operations. I'm not sure if he's truly seen it all, but he's seen almost everything, and he's on the phone with us today as well. He is responsible for training all the managers at the Not Your Average Joe's concept, so he spends a lot of time thinking about operational improvements and operational efficiencies. And my name is Jason Broder. I'm the Director of Energy Services and Products at Powerhouse Dynamics. We are an energy technology company serving restaurants and other multi-location businesses. My focus is on product development and energy analysis. Great. Well, let's dive in to the material. I'm going to do actually, I'm not going to do this slide. Apologies, Tim. I'm going to turn this slide over to you and let you introduce sort of the problem statement here.
Okay, terrific. Again, this is Tim Reichert with Energy Sherlock. Appreciate you being on the line today. One of the things we find with our clients that have multiple locations in multiple states is they go into the hot summer months, busy as ever, and they know that it's costing they see their electric bill going up, 30+% during the summer, but sometimes they don't really realize what that number means and how big it really is. And what we wanted to show you, just a real quick, problem statement is, when you look, depending on where you are in the country, we're here on the East Coast, and we have a pretty long summer, probably more on the high side with 120 days of summer. A lot of our clients are operating 12 to 16 hours a day and paying a variety of acquisition costs for electricity. But when it comes down to the bottom line, which we're all trying to manage, the cooling costs per location usually will go up and cost about $10,000 or more just to cover the next 90 to 120 days. Obviously, a very, very expensive part of the year for people to operate and to operate profitably. So we thought today would be a good opportunity to tackle these big cooling costs and help you out.
Absolutely, and I'll just make a note also, Tim, that the rates we showed that I've indicated or we've indicated on the slide are designed to be inclusive of demand charges, which, as many folks may know, is a major expense for you, depending on your utility rate class and your agreement with your supplier. I would just note it's definitely worth your time to do the research to figure out what your exposure to demand charges may be. I know in our neck of the woods they're very high during the summer period, and peak period pricing is also something that you should be aware of, because that can have a major impact on your bill.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'd say when you look at every dollar of energy you can save during the summer, if you're, depending on your net margin rates, in the restaurant industry, generally $1 of energy saved is equal to about $12 or more in food and beverage sales. So it does add up very, very quickly. So hopefully the practical tips today will help you guys on the bottom line.
And if I may just add, this is Ralph. You know, with that kind of money too, $10,000 in terms of profit is a big portion of your monthly P&Ls, and certainly nothing to overlook. So anything we learned today that can help you in that fashion is very valuable indeed.
Great, thanks, guys. So let me tee this up slightly more here. So in addition to being expensive summer days, there are also potentially very inefficient summer days. And what I mean by that is that your cooling equipment may be running for hours when you don't need it to. This is often the result of thermostat issues, which we'll get into. The chart here is meant to indicate that. You'll see a 24-hour period, and this is some air conditioning equipment that is running during the wee hours of the morning. It's possible that that's useful, but I think unlikely that is a really good use of resources. Other challenges that drive inefficiency, disconnected ductwork. We'll come back to this photo later. It's the story, a customer of Tim's. But silly things like this happen frequently, and you can imagine the impact on the cooling efficiency of this system is pretty severe when this kind of breakage occurs. And also, the RTUs themselves, the rooftop units themselves, are fairly complicated pieces of equipment, frankly, and they have a lot of ways they can break. This is a study from a California Public Interest Research Group, or the California Public Interest Research Group, and it's from 2011. The point here is these percentages are the number of RTUs they surveyed that had this particular problem. Not necessarily was it the case that was the only problem. What that means is, probably at least 50% of the RTUs out there have at least one of these or more, and those all have inefficiency or have efficiency penalties associated with them. So we've seen that it's pretty expensive. It's also probably more expensive than it needs to be. Maybe even as much as 50% more expensive than it needs to be, and that tees us up to get into the core of our material here, which are the 4 smart moves that you can take to drive those costs down. Let me just quickly introduce these. I'm going to show a couple of pictures before each of our 4 smart moves, just to kind of, or we're going to show some pictures just to tee it up. Here you see, our old friends, the thermostats. I'm going to highlight a couple of things here. Whoops. Showing the time and date. Now, either of these may be right, 2:24 on Friday or 4:11 a.m. on Monday. However, both of them can't be right, given that these were about 6 inches away from each other on a wall in a customer of ours' manager's office. So that's not a good sign that they're managing their cooling and heating effectively to have this kind of problem. Interestingly enough, the managers here at this location did what's rational. In the face of not having control over the time, they simply set the temperature to be the same for all time periods for each of the 2 thermostats. In one case 70, in the other case 69. So that's a clever strategy, but of course that's the exact opposite of what a programmable thermostat is trying to achieve. So with that, Tim, why don't you talk about what we could do about it, smart move number 1.
Right. Well, thanks, Jason. I think the practicality of what we're about to go through is something that probably won't take you very long to achieve. Accurate clocks and making sure that those are where they need to be is probably the best first step, because it's going to help you cool when you need to cool. And what we mean by that is a lot of our clients will have a battle between what their staff wants to have the temperature at versus what the clients want the temperature at. And I think we've all gone into restaurants where the staff is working hard in the back making the food, and then everybody's putting a coat on in the dining room because it's freezing out there. Well, little does the owner know that or at least expect, but the person over the grill wants it at 62 degrees because he's hot because he's cooking all the time. And you don't want that to sabotage your bottom line when you're really there to cool and keep things nice for your clients so they keep coming back. So you really need to understand, first of all, the flow and the workflow of your space, What we ask our clients to do is to map out truly when the peak demand hours are for their clients. Let's say it's the lunch crowd and the dinner crowd, and we ask them to modulate their temperature set points. And when I say set points, generally speaking, most of our clients are keeping their spaces in the 72 to 74 degree set point, for occupied times. And then when it's unoccupied after hours, they'll bump it up to 82 to 85 degree range. Usually about an 8 to 10 degree setback spread. And there's important reasons to do that, but what's really important is that when you are doing your set points off your peak and troughs, we recommend that about an hour before you open, or about 30 minutes before you get into a peak rush time, that's when you want to have your set point reached. So if your staff starts showing up at 9 o'clock in the morning to start prepping for food, et cetera, for the day, at 8 o'clock we would have you change from let's say the 84 degree set point at night to the 74 degree set point in the morning. And then when they get into the lunch hour, about a half an hour before clients tend to start showing up, at least the bulk of them, let's say that's noon, then at 11:30 we'd say, hey, take that set point from 74 down to 72, make sure it's a little bit cooler for the clients for the next 2 hours, and then around 1:30 bump it back up to 74. And then more importantly, it's probably managing the off hours. We have a lot of clients that hit that schedule their closing times just like their occupied times. It stays at 72 or 74 degrees all day long. So it is important for you to harness the energy savings opportunity in the night and really set that up to say the low 80s, and that's usually helpful. But an hour before you close, we would suggest that you move it from 74 up to 82 to 85 and coast into the unoccupied times. There's no need to cool the restaurant for that last hour before everybody closes up and leaves. So those are a couple of strategies. The other part is if you have a 24/7 operation, there are strategies you can do to take 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and throughout the day you can actually achieve a 1 to 2 hour break in the cooling time, and every single hour counts. It adds up pretty substantially over the summer months. So those are a couple things that we would say, really talk to your staff on, we're going to keep these set points for the clients, not for you. These are reasonable temperatures, and usually the staff gets on board once you really communicate that with them. So Ralph, what do you find?
Well, piggybacking right off of that, Tim, not overcooling for the staff, but for the guest in mind is inevitably something that gets overlooked when people do get a little bit comfortable in the building. So even though you want to get the staff on board, it's very important to kind of, maybe take the controls out of their hands. And to that point, staff control of the staff's options would be, having covers for them, have internet thermostats with central control and local lockout, or even have remote temperature sensors so that you are truly controlling it. Then you can have those set points that you mentioned are so valuable already in there, automatically done, and nothing has to be done manually. Training the entire team so that everyone is aware and feels involved is important to let them know what the goal is, but having it, be less people involved is definitely a key to success.
Great, good points, guys. I would just only add that, to the question about set points, there's numerous studies, EPA and others, that have shown every degree that you move that set point is 2 to 3% of your cooling costs. So if you're thinking to yourself, I could never get away with 72, I'm actually have to be at 70, and even that's pushing it, that could be close to 5% of your cooling costs, and that could be somewhere in the $500 to $1,000 range just for the summer season, which is not insignificant if you put that in terms of the number of customers you need to get through the door to make up that lost cost. I might suggest it's somewhat of a risky bet to make that decision. And the other point on thermostats is, you may be sort of rolling your eyes, but again, study after study shows that people at home don't program the thermostats, and people in their work life rarely program them all that effectively either. It really is not getting done. That's why it's smart move number one. It's very easy and very effective. Excuse me. All right, let's move on to smart move number two. A couple of slides here for you. Question might be, what are these? What are we looking at? There's more than one way to answer that question. In this case, what we're looking at are major sources of cooling load. What we've got on the top left is a large exhaust hood that runs for many feet. That exhaust hood is pulling air out of that restaurant by design, but it's pulling potentially conditioned, expensive air right out through the top of the roof, which is what your rooftop units are trying to do. The other picture is HEAT lamps. HEAT spells heat. Heat is the opposite of cool, so these lamps right now are providing some nice ambient warmth to their local environment, which is potentially not what we want to be striving for during the summer cooling season. So what does that mean? Smart move number two is reducing cooling loads where you can. So for example, on the exhaust hoods I mentioned, this is a chart that shows somebody starting their exhaust hood later one day than they did the other day. It was, either, I believe, at 5:30 one morning and at 8:30 the next morning. That 3 hours of exhausting, potentially cooled or pre-cooled air is expensive. Ventilation can represent, somewhere between 20 and 40% of your entire cooling load, because it is pulling so many CFM, through the roof every minute. So making some kind of adjustment to how you're using equipment, of course, within reason, is going to make an impact on your cooling bill. What I would consider a best practice, you're using your heat lamps during the times when you need them. This piggybacks on the comments from Ralph and Tim. You can see it at around noon. They're using their heat lamps to serve their guests, and then they're shutting them off for a couple of hours until the evening rush as well. That's going to make a pretty big difference, because that entire red box there is just straight heating load or cooling load that they're able to avoid. Other equipment to think about: ovens, oven fans. They may have their toasters. Sometimes even bathroom exhaust fans. If you've made a judgment that you don't need your bathrooms operational through the off hours for staff who are maybe there, or cleaners, then make sure those fans are off, because otherwise they're pulling CFM right out of the building as well. So to summarize, this is about trimming the operating hours where possible during the summer, and throttling back some equipment during slow periods. One interesting thing to think about is a human at rest adds about 450 BTUs of heat to any given room. So as your guests increase, they themselves are, generating cooling load. But 1,000 watts in a conveyor toaster is usually between 1,000 and 3,000 watts. For an hour is about 3,500 BTUs. So the question you might ask yourself is, how many extra guests do you have standing in your kitchen? Probably a lot. Of a lot of equipment that's operating, generating heat. Of course, you have to have some to do your core business, but the point here is making seasonal adjustments to your business is probably not something new. Menus change, other things change, and some of these operating procedures can change to your benefit when it comes to reducing your cooling loads during the summer.
Yeah, and if I can add, one of the things that we find, you mentioned about the hoods, drawing out the conditioned air. One very quick and easy way is you can tell if your property is drawing in air, or what we call negative pressure, is if you're going into the restaurant and you really have to tug on that door to open it. It's almost like there's a suction to it that's keeping it closed. That means it's really you have negative pressure in that restaurant. Is sucking in as much air as it can get to fill in the restaurant, because the hoods are piping out the top. So if you have a negative pressure situation, that's a very, very easy way to determine that you are, have a much higher cooling load, because you keep drawing in all that hot summer air through all the little crevices and things and door frames in your building. So keep an eye out for negative pressure. It's easy to find, and you can get somebody out there to balance your air properly.
And if I could jump in on that too, Tim, if your makeup air is heated or cooled, some restaurant locations have that. It's probably a waste. You can set the temp to 60 degrees and let the rooftop units do the heating and cooling. And then, the seasonal adjustments that have to be made each year, of course, add them to the standard training of anybody that's been added to your team new that year, so they're aware of what's going on and how you're trying to achieve more efficiency in heating or cooling your restaurant.
Great, great. All right, let's keep on moving. Tim, why don't you talk to us about this next one?
Okay. Well, here's we're going to show you a couple pictures. We do a lot of operational reviews for clients where we'll go on site and do a walkthrough and just try to identify those quick practical things that could be indications of highly inefficient equipment or things that could be hurting their bottom line. Here's a quick example, and this is going to be part of a recommendation for everybody to do a quick walkthrough at every time you have a major seasonal change. It's good to do a quick 30-minute walkthrough of your property. So you go up to the rooftop units or you go up to your vent system, and you can barely see through the vents because you can actually see the dirt and the grime and the clogged coils and filters. So this is just a quick look at what you'll see, which means that this particular piece of equipment is working extra hard to try to draw air through this gunk, and this is making you waste a lot of electricity. Here's an interesting example, and we actually find this more often than one would expect. Here's a picture that we took. We were doing a review for a client. He gave us a store that was 16 years that they've had on the books, and it was always the worst performing store for energy usage. And we went there, and within 20 minutes, we were poked our head up above the drop ceiling, and this is what we found. In fact, we found 20 others just like it. They did not have any of their ductwork attached to the registers. So they were heating and cooling, 15,000 cubic square feet above the drop ceiling for the last 16 years. So this was a good example of something that you might be able to find really quickly. Sometimes the ductwork does become loose on its own, and you can quickly attach that. You'll also see a picture of insulation here that's been pushed aside. Again, there's lab technicians and people around the properties, and sometimes they go up in the drop ceiling, push the insulation to the side so they can take a look. Well, they don't replace the insulation. And you'll see the thermal imaging here, that blue spot amongst all the orange is basically saying, that blue spot's about 32 degrees and everything else around it is about 50-something degrees. So this is an example of the importance of insulation. You have it. Sometimes you might have to retack the batting that might have fallen off the bottom of the roof deck. We see that pretty frequently where it just droops down. And anytime you have that falling out of place, it's a great opportunity for the heat to come in through the roof deck or through your drop ceiling and to affect the climate that you want to manage. So these are just a couple quick pictures. So what we are going to recommend for your smart move number 3 is doing your own 30-minute walk around where it doesn't cost anything but maybe a little time. We're going to recommend that you do this at every major season change, so maybe 3 or 4 times a year, depending on where you live. The main concerns that you want to check is your building envelope, which is your walls, your windows, exterior doors, and your roof line, and then your cooling systems, of course. And when you're looking at the envelope, generally speaking, the most common findings we see are air infiltration issues along the roof deck, the roof framing, and exterior doors. This is where negative pressure comes into play, falling insulation, so forth and so on. And also holes that can be easily caulked or filled with foam, so you don't have any penetrations that are allowing the air exchange throughout the building. So check your thermostats first and foremost. We talked about that. Take 5 minutes, poke your head up in the drop ceiling area and look in a couple spots around the restaurant, in the kitchen and the dining area, looking for quick fixes. And then up on the roof, you'll generally see any bent or dirty condenser fins. those can easily be combed out and into place so air can get into those systems again. And of course, looking at dirty economizer screens and things like that. So really the only thing you're going to need is a stepladder, a screwdriver, a flashlight, some WD-40, maybe you have to work in an economizer every now and then, and that's it. So it's a very, very practical, easy thing to do, and it could save you literally hundreds, if not thousands of dollars throughout the next 90 to 120 days. So, Ralph, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, Tim, thank you. Just something I wanted to add. When I saw that that slide of the duct not being connected, we had a bit of a chuckle because I have been a general manager who's taken over a restaurant that was inefficient, and in trying to figure out why it was inefficient, I've popped the ceiling tile and seen that exact same setup as I shared with you last time. And so it is definitely important to do that walkthrough. I just wanted to also mention that checking the refrigeration units inside the restaurant for blocked airflow near the coils, that definitely happens as well if the units are not pulled away from the wall on your cook line, for example, and making sure that they're cleaned of any debris or dust that might be clogging them up, making it easier. You want to have minimal heat exchange so your compressor is not working too hard and the unit will definitely not hit temperature. Not something you want to have happen as well.
Great, good points, guys. I think this is a powerful one, and something that probably, in addition to finding a 30-minute walk around, will probably find additional operational issues that you may not, that your managers may not notice on a day-to-day basis. So there's some ancillary benefits to that too. All right, let's keep on moving to our number 4. Ralph, why don't you talk about the intro here?
Sure. The economizer is the #1 fault for rooftop units. Making sure they're connected, they're properly placed temp sensors, and accurate damper positions are keys. A clean economizer screen is also part of a good functioning unit. Lastly, the vent fins that Tim mentioned when we were looking at the last slide there dramatically degrade the performance of the unit. You definitely want to get up on your roofs from time to time yourselves. Another thing that I've used in my past to help with less experienced managers that are new to your team is having a checklist prepared for them to review when your HVAC vendor is doing their routine PMs. A PM contract is not something that everybody has, but it is definitely something I would highly recommend. They're going to do the routine stuff of changing filters and belts and so forth. But if you have this checklist to go over and eliminate a lot of this stuff here, it will lead to more efficiency.
And this is I think, a good summary here, Ralph, of some of the things you were just mentioning regarding effective RTU maintenance, which is our smart move number 4. Emphasis is on the effective. Everybody, well, I shouldn't say that. Most people are doing something around RTU maintenance, but whether it's really effective or not is I think, a big question mark, and it's sometimes hard to know. Ralph, the checklist that you mentioned is definitely a best practice. Having a manager sign off on that PM every time it's done, so you have a record of it, and you can get that manager up the curve a little bit to learn about what those things are is important, especially during the summer season. For some, heating too. We're not talking about heating today, but of course the RTUs typically do the heating as well. One of the things I'll mention too on this chart is, having some real-time data or having some more advanced metering can be really useful. These two charts are highlighting 2 different RTUs that are having some issues. The top one is a unit that is so-called short cycling. That is not an efficient way to run your unit. It's going to burn out your compressor much more quickly. It's also less efficient on a kilowatt hour per ton of cooling basis. And the bottom one is the opposite. This is a unit that's running flat out, and there may be some hot days where this happens, but it's more likely a case of the equipment, the RTU itself is dirty or not cleaned well, the condenser coils are dirty, or the unit is undersized, or the temperature sensors are not in a good place. So this, both of these scenarios are ones that you want to try and avoid, and having some sophisticated data can nail this on the head rather than waiting until some kind of equipment failure or waiting 16 years to discover it, one day. So number 4 is effective RTU maintenance. Those are our big 4. I'm just keeping an eye on the clock. We're about 30 minutes in, so as promised, let's wrap this up and save some time for questions. The summary here is 4 smart moves, 4 by the 4th, implementing thermostat best practices, reducing cooling loads when you can, the do-it-yourself 30-minute walk-around to identify additional maintenance you need, and to tackle some obvious things that you may be surprised or shocked to find, and then effective RTU maintenance, stepping up that game are all very important. And I put some very rough savings ranges around this. I think it's been all of our experience that slicing that cooling cost by 20 to even 60% is achievable. If you've got a restaurant, an individual location, or perhaps you haven't had an opportunity to focus on cooling before, it can yield some serious benefits, and that is the summary of our 4 by the 4th. I don't know if there's any other comments. Anything else you'd add, Ralph?
Yes, I definitely just wanted to mention also that we're not reinventing the wheel here with some of the things we talked about, but sharing and teaching to the rest of the team is actually essential. I've also been using the e-monitor system here in my location in Watertown, and with that, I feel that I had another tool added to my toolbox, if you will. We were able to set up some parameters and some warning signals for my team on equipment when it wasn't, hitting its proper efficiencies. We set up an email alert system, so one of my closing managers, for example, would get a notification that one of the units was not cycling properly. Then it's an alert for us to go out and check it out ourselves rather than waiting until the unit fails completely. So I just wanted to make sure you have the tools to do the job, and that you need to invest in making your equipment people efficient.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think those are the big 4. We had some more smart moves, but we're a little bit over time. So I should have noted in the beginning, by the way, we'll make copies of all of this material available to you after the session, and you can review the more smart moves at that point. But at this time, let's move to some questions and hopefully answers. Please use that question or chat feature. Actually, I think it's the question feature that is the right one. To type in questions. We've got a few here teed up. I'm going to actually use my moderator privilege to throw one right in the very beginning, because it's something that I think we hear more often than not, and that is the following. I still think there's many out there who are thinking, I've heard that setting back my equipment or my thermostats is actually going to use more energy, because then my restaurant gets hot, and then of course it has to cool down in the morning or at some point, and that's extra work, and that is therefore not an efficient practice. This may not be what your central maintenance director would say, but I think you'd be surprised at how many team members may still have some form of that thought in their head. And so let me throw that out to maybe Tim, to you, to say how would you respond to that kind of thought?
Well, it's a great question. Actually, it comes up pretty frequently. I would say it does somewhat depend on the hours that you can raise that set point. As an example, for a quick serve restaurant that is running 16, 18 hours a day, and then shuts down, let's say, essentially from 2 o'clock to 7 in the morning, 8 in the morning, if they don't have a breakfast, crowd. If you're able to harness a 4 to 6 hour window of time and letting your set point drift from, let's say, 74 degrees up to the low 80s, I would say do that. We've done the math on that, and it works out to the advantage of our clients to go ahead and raise that set point, and then come back in the morning and cool down the place at 8 to 10 degree difference. It does work well, especially if your HVAC equipment is well taken care of. If you have a 24 or closer to a 24-hour operation, obviously, let it ride. You may not go all the way up to 80 degrees, but you could probably still go from, let's say, 74 and bump it up to 78. At certain low peak times or off peak times. So, but we do let our clients know that if the equipment is operating as it's designed and intended, even if you can get a 3-hour break, take it, because you are going to save more money doing it that way, and you're not going to hurt your machines by making them run, let's say for half an hour to make up that 8 degrees. So it works out economically to do it that way, is what we've found.
Great. Thanks, Tim. One question coming in here I think is probably best targeted for Ralph, and that's a little bit around the training question, I guess. And the question comes in as, in your experience, how does this realistically fall on the priority scheme for staff and managers? Adding in my own thoughts, I mean, the numbers sort of are the numbers, but there's a lot to do every day. And how do you think about getting people motivated and educated on this topic so that they can make these types of improvements and have this kind of awareness?
Well, a lot of times in our industry, Jason, we have as high as 40% of our existing management be internal promotes, and that means it's someone that's been an hourly performer in one of our restaurant locations, and either went to school for something else and has decided they love what they see here at the restaurant every day and want to do that, but it doesn't really prepare them for the impacts of what they can do financially each day in the building. So in sharing the results with them and then affecting change, and then showing how that change has affected the restaurant financially and the performance there, it will empower them to make a difference in a positive fashion for your team. As much as I'm here, I'm not here 24/7, and so I would be a fool to think that I could effect all the change by myself. The smart way to do it is, by sharing in the knowledge with everyone else, and then letting the team do it. That's really the only way it's going to happen.
Great. Okay, thank you. We've got. I'm just noticing we're pretty much out of time. I promised a 40-minute webinar. We're a few minutes over. There are some other questions here, and I'll tell you what. We'll plan on getting back to those folks individually after the session. So let me move. Let me move and just kind of move to wrap up here. Again, on behalf of Tim and Ralph and myself, thanks for joining with us today. As you've heard, our experience is these smart moves are achievable and impactful. There's things that you can do soon, next week, this week, to make a real difference on the financial performance of your business this summer and in coming years. The slides and the webinar recording will be sent to you for your reference. And other than that, we wish you well this summer. Thanks again for joining us, and all the best.